Hey there, everybody. Brad Geiger here with another episode of Webcomics Confidential. And today we've got a question in the mailbag talking about print collections of webcomics. Let's go to the question. It says, I'd like to know your current thoughts on printing collections of webcomics, specifically the practice of publishing semi-annual chronological collections of the strip, as most webcomic creators used to do. I know in the olden days of the original How to Make Webcomics, these collections were one of the primary sources of income. Even a few years ago in the podcast, David Kellett mentioned that he didn't put out any new collections during the time he was working on Stripped, the documentary about online comics, which cost him X amount of income that year. However, in recent years, it seems most webcomic creators have gotten away from this practice. Scott Kurtz hasn't put out a PvP collection in years. Dave Kellett has changed into putting out themed collections instead of chronological ones. Many others have let their collections go out of print, at most offering digital books. Anyway, as both a lover of holding printed books and someone who has long periods without internet access, these collections were one of my primary ways of experiencing and enjoying and supporting webcomics. So I'm sad to see them disappear. I know in your most recent webcomics.com poll that creators responded that only 15% of their income came from merchandise, including books, so I understand it is likely a purely financial decision. But if you have any further light to shed upon this topic, I'd love to see it in a future article or Webcomics Confidential. Well, so let's talk about that. First of all, I want to clear up a little something about the poll. It's a small distinction, but it's important in terms of what we're going to be talking about here. The poll did not reveal that web cartoonists get 15% of their income from books. What it revealed is that of the respondents, 15% of them said that they get most of their income from books. That's an important distinction. Number two, I don't know that I agree with your extrapolation. In other words, you mainly center on Dave Kellett and Scott Kurtz, and then you kind of extrapolate that this is a source of a bigger thing. I don't think that's the case. Dave's case was very, very specific. In other words, he sunk an awful lot of time, a couple of years, into doing that documentary about online comics. And during that time, he freely admits his own business suffered because he had to prioritize. He has since gotten back into those things. I tried to. I do want you to know. I tried to get him on the show today. We just could not get our schedules to interchange, and I was not. I did not get an answer from him about what's the backstory here. So I don't want to try and talk on his behalf. However, using common sense, what I would imagine is happening is that by his choice of going with those packaged theme books as opposed to Sheldon collections, I would imagine that those are probably bigger sellers for him, and I'm totally guessing there. I would guess that those are bigger sellers for him, and he's got to go where the money is. Does that mean the end of chronological collections? I would guess not. More to the point, I would think at some point from both Scott and Dave, we're going to see another kind of big, that solid collection, not of 1 year, but of several years, like the Awesomeology. I think I've got that up there. Yeah, like the Awesomeology up there. In fact, Scott's probably due to have another Awesomeology out. Let's go to Scott. He hasn't been doing. He hasn't released a PvP collection in years. That's accurate. But again, you're talking about a guy there who has been involved in a lot, especially the past 5 years or so. He's been involved in a lot of things, launching Table Titans, doing that. He's been really. He's been stretching himself very, very thin. And it's I think it's something that we're going to see PvP collections coming back as soon as he's got some of the other things at the point that he needs to put them. But it's what it actually is. I don't really buy that webcomic print collections are going out of favor, or that I don't buy that they're not big money makers. Now, I may eat those words because I'll be releasing a Kickstarter for an Evil Inc. graphic novel just as soon as I'm done with the artist editions for the Evil Inc. After Dark series that I put out on Kickstarter, and we might see. Uh, I might get a wake up call for myself, but I do not buy that this is something that is slipping. Although, well, okay, let me put a caveat there. I don't know if it's slipping, but I do know this, that many of us find ourselves in a place where things like crowdfunding, Patreon, and Kickstarter, those things are at the forefront of what makes our businesses go. And you might immediately say, well, Kickstarter, you kickstart your book. But like Dave might be seeing, sometimes those books aren't necessarily chronological collections of the strip. It might be something that's more themed. It might be a different type of collection that tends to perform better than than a straight up collection. But I don't know whether that's. I don't know that I feel very comfortable extrapolating those two guys and trying to build a bigger picture. I think, for the most part, very much webcomic print collections are still very solid tentpole in what holds up many of our businesses. I will say this about that, though. From the very start, going all the way back to the late 90s, from the very, very start, the defining one of the defining characteristics of a webcomic is that we didn't have just one income stream. We built this thing up based on a number of income streams, and if you do see a drop off in like a webcomic print collection, I do think that it's fair to assume that that income stream is being overshadowed by other income streams, and there are other that artist is either focusing on the other things that are making better money, or is in a situation where perhaps they're on a downslide and they've just gotta struggle to keep the lights on. That happens as well. That's a very real risk in doing something like this, and maybe they don't feel they have even the wherewithal to put the time and prioritize a book collection. They're just trying to keep that strip or that comic going. But I don't know. The answer to your question is I really don't know, although from my personal experience, I do not think that book collections are on the downslide. I do think that in some cases, particularly the two creators that you mentioned, Dave and Scott, I think those guys, it was more of a question of priorities and the fact that you can only do so much. And that's the bigger extrapolation. That actually tells not a very telling story about the importance of print collections in a web cartoonist's business. What it does tell you is that is one of the real growing pains that you face as your comic becomes more popular, as your business becomes more viable. At some point, you have to bring other people in on your business, and hopefully people you can trust. And at some point, you need a bigger team. This webcomic started out with just you, but later on it becomes necessary to bring other people in. Dave has experience with interns and colorists, and I know he's working with someone right now putting out his most recent book, which is a book of those animal anatomy cartoons. Scott brought in Corey. He's brought in a number of colorists, a number of co-creators. At some point, this thing grows, if you're lucky, and that's the real thing to look out for. That's the bigger takeaway from this whole thing that you mentioned. The bigger takeaway for me is to be cognizant of the fact that at some point, and I've already brought in colorists and stuff like that, and I've had an intern at different times, but at some point, in order for you to continue to grow your business, you're going to need to bring in other people. You're going to have to build a team. At some point, this is not going to be just you. That's the real growing pain. That's the real challenge for webcomics. Because you've got to make sure that as you're bringing those people in, you can pay for all that. You're still bringing in enough money so that that action that the team member you brought in is also generating extra funds so that you can keep the lights on. It's really, really ticklish. It's really, really difficult to try to make something like that go. And if you don't, what happens, as you're seeing, is one person sitting behind a computer can only do so much. I can tell you from personal experience, I'm way behind on the Evil Inc. graphic novels, years behind. And it is not that I can't make money with a book. It's not that I don't want to do a book. It's a simple matter of priorities and the fact that just me being who I am, I feel very uncomfortable launching a new Kickstarter until all the books from the old Kickstarter are shipped and taken care of. That's a big thing for me. I don't want to ever be in a situation where I can't I'm starting one thing before I finished the other, especially when those are paying customers. So the answer to your question is I don't think that print collections are decreasing in the prominence of a web cartoonist's arsenal in terms of their revenue, but I do think it's an indication of the real intense growing pains that some web cartoonists are going to feel as their business takes off and as it starts to grow. Because what you are definitely seeing, and I think I can say this pretty confident, is the fact that one person or even a small team of people can only accomplish so much, and then things that start to fall down on the list of priorities, and that might be why you see fewer book collections. Maybe you've got a different experience. Hit me up. Hit the comments over at webcomics.com. Let me know what you think. Am I missing? Is this actually is this person not extrapolating from just two people? Are there more people that are putting out fewer print collections than they used to? Hit me at the comments. Let me know. Let's talk about this. I think it's a pretty fascinating conversation. But for me, I think the real conversation is the growing pains issue. I think print collections are always going to be a very big part of what we do. But I want to hear from you. This is Brad Geiger, Webcomics Confidential, and we'll see you next time.